Hi to my wolf pack, Charlie Black 20 back again. And today, this is going to be the first video of a series. Hopefully, I won't go rattling on too long in each one, but today, November 20th, is actually a very special day for historians like myself, because today is the 80-year anniversary of the opening of the Nuremburg trials, the International Military Tribunal, where the remnants of the Nazi leadership are put on trial for their crimes against the world, basically. And in this series, I will be doing pieces of the trial, as well as why the trial actually came to be in the first place. Because at the time, 1945, there was no guarantee there was going to be a trial at all. In fact, as late as 1943, the Allies hadn't even said they would do anything to the Nazis. It wasn't until the Moscow Declaration of 1943 that the three big powers, Great Britain under Churchill, the United States under Roosevelt, and the Soviet Union under Stalin, declared that not only would they be seeking unconditional surrender, but that the perpetrators of the Nazi criminality would be brought to account for their crimes. That's about all they said. They would be brought to account. And it wasn't until late 1944, early 1945, that the idea of putting these Nazi criminals on trial really started to gain momentum. You see, Stalin and the Soviet Union, they did want a trial, but a show trial like had happened in the 1930s in the Soviet Union, where you have the presumed guilty party brought in, the charges are read against them, they will either plead guilty or just be found guilty, and then will be brought out and shot. And Churchill was of a similar mindset in that time period from 1943 to 44, where they believed that the Nazi big leaders should be summarily shot within 48 hours of capture. In America, there was a divide among the political leadership about what should be done with the German leadership. One part of it, one faction had Roosevelt's ear the most. They wanted to do away with the criminals, just shoot them, hang them, just no trial, just kill them. They would basically reduce Germany itself into a rump state of agricultural lands and take away all its industry, basically return it to subsistence living and punish the entire nation of Germany for the crimes of the Nazis. But by 1944, Roosevelt and the people he was listening to, a different faction of the United States leadership, had persuaded him that that wasn't a good idea, mainly because of what had happened after the Treaty of Versailles in 1918, which very heavily punished Germany for its role in World War I, and that led to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. And also this faction just did not agree with the idea of punishing the entire German people for what they perceived to be crimes of individuals. And they wanted to make their mark on history by holding these men accountable through a trial, through laws, because the Nazis had ignored all laws. And so by 1945, Roosevelt and Stalin had agreed to a trial. Churchill and France, eventually coming into this, agreed on a trial. The only question is what kind of trial, because the Soviets really wanted a show trial. The United States and Britain wanted to have a true full-blown trial where, you have the defense and the prosecution sparring with each other with a jury. And the French were willy-nilly here and there. They would follow the continental system like the Soviets, but they didn't really see too much of a role for lawyers. It was more the judges. And these things had to be worked out if there was going to be a trial at all. And so by May 1945, Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler has killed himself, and the German government under Admiral Karl Donitz, have surrendered to the Americans, British, and eventually the Soviets. Total surrender. And so in June 1945, the top legal minds of that were selected by the various nations come together in London to talk about this idea of a trial. And they work out their differences as best they can. Obviously, there's a lot of headbutting, politically speaking, because the United States and Britain and France are eyeing the Soviet Union as the next big threat, but they do want to deal with the Nazis and they want to create international law to prevent another war like this happening again, because everybody, the public, the leadership, are starting to uncover just how extensive the Nazi criminality is, particularly with the liberation of concentration camps and the filming of them by the liberators. So by August of that year, 1945, what the Allied nations come together and figure out is what is called the London Charter. This is where they figure out how they're going to do the trial and what charges they're going to put onto the defendants, as well as possibly where they're going to hold these trials. So they decide that they're going to have judges as the jury, which is very similar to the continental system of Europe, but they will have a defense attorney and a prosecution like you have in the Anglo-American style. So that's a compromise, as well as the judges are going to decide what kind of evidence is admissible. So it's going to be on whether they decide it's relevant for the defense or the prosecution, not what certain rules say. And these international laws are going to be completely new. This is the first time that there's going to be international law ever. There had been certain norms of war, but there was also thought that war in and of itself was a norm, which they're trying to get rid of at this point with international law by saying that no, there is an international global conglomeration together of nations that will try criminals who break these international laws. And the thing is, they're not going to try a nation for this. They're not trying the nation of Germany like they did with Versailles, where they just punished Germany unilaterally. They're trying the Nazi leadership that's left over from the end of the war, because they're trying to show that under international laws, they can hold these men accountable for their actions, because they weren't acting in service of a nation. They were acting as individuals within a nation, within the international sphere. And it's also decided at this point where the trial is going to be held. You see, nobody knew exactly where they would hold it and how it would be done. And eventually, it's reached that the first day of trial will be held in Berlin, the capital, which is under Soviet control, along with the city itself under various controls of the 4 different powers. And the rest of the trial would be held in Nuremberg. And Nuremberg it's held there for several reasons. There's a symbolic aspect. It was the site of Nuremberg rallies for the Nazis. It was the Nuremberg race laws, which stripped German Jews of their citizenship, and then basically took them out of all German life. And the other reason is financial as well as political. You see, the Nuremberg is under the control of the Americans. It's in the American zone. So the Americans will be running the show predominantly, the security of it, as well as financially they can afford to do this, which is much harder for France, which is now coming out of World War II, dealing with their own problems that have been exploited by the Germans. Great Britain, their empire is falling to pieces, and their economy is in horrible shambles. And the Soviet Union, obviously, they've been devastated by this war. Yeah, they're the winners, but boy, did it cost them. And the other reason is really practical, because Nuremberg, there's a palace of justice there that is in relatively good shape. The insides need to be worked on and rebuilt, but the roof is there, the structure's there, and there's a prison that can accommodate 1,200 inmates at a time adjoining the Palace of Justice. So it's decided Nuremberg is where we will hold the rest of the trial after the first day in Berlin. And so on November 20th and 21st, the first international military tribunal, the Nuremberg trials, are held, opened, and the Nazi criminals are put on trial. So I hope this was a good video for you guys to hear. This is how the Nuremberg trials came into being. There is so many more details that we could go into, but this is just a short video for that. And in the next video, guys, we will be covering who the defendants were, who the prosecution was, and what each of them were going to do. So, looking forward to the next video, guys. Catch you later, my wolf pack.